Hi, I'm Chris from airwindows, and we're back into audio fiddling plugins. We've been through our enormous dither explorations, and hopefully what you've got now is something, whether it's something as simple as TPDF or as fancy as Spatialize or Naturalize, by which you can throw it in your DAW and hear the finest details of the other plugins I'm making available for you. And here is one. This is called PowerSag, and it is sort of the lead-in to some of the other plugins that airwindows is based upon. Specifically, I'm thinking of Desk, the first desks, Desk, Transdesk, and TubeDesk, which were also among the first plugins to have no controls and just be a single box to do stuff with and add analog features. Now, PowerSag is sort of well, I can just show you, but then I'll have to explain a little bit. Here's my old Alienkins. This is useful because it has bass and sounds by which you can hear all kinds of distortions on them fairly easily. But then it shouldn't be that difficult to hear. Do you think that's the compressor? I don't know. Does the compressor do this? So what are we listening to? Well, PowerSag is the kind of thing where it's keeping a buffer of samples, and then rather than having a compression algorithm, it acts as if there's a lot of audio content, it's like sucking energy out of the power supply for that part of the circuit. Speed is based upon how big of an area it is, sort of like how big your capacitor is. So if we've got it all the way cranked up and then the speed is very slow, what we get is audio starvation. But it's kicking in a lot, like whereas if we speed it up, it's the sound of circuits failing, basically. It's the sound of amplifying stages trying to produce enough voltage to do what they must do and just not being able to pull enough voltage out of the little power supply circuits. This happens a lot on cheap analog equipment. In order to hear what it's supposed to be used like, I have to turn it down from the depth of 0, because the depth of 1, because that's simply too extreme. That's wiping it out so horrendously that it's not even funny. So what we'll do is we'll start it at 0 and then sneak it in and listen to what happens. And again, speed 1 is awfully slow. We could crank it all the way up to the fastest speed possible, in which case we start to hear this when we're fooling with it. See, it's breaking up. Back it off. And we have a really aggressive sort of boosty thing going on. Without it's normal. With. But that speed is kind of too fast to hear, whereas 1 was too slow to hear. So what we'll do is we'll start dialing in a speed that's more It's faster than 1, but a lot slower than 0, and it'll be more like what an actual circuit might do if you hit it really hard and it just couldn't pull enough energy out of its little capacitor. And we'll exaggerate it to be able to hear where that is. See, we got a grind going on here, and then a sort of pumping going on here that becomes slower and slower until it no longer associates itself with the sounds. That makes the snare sound kind of exploding. So now that we've dialed this in, to where the snare sounds kind of overhyped, we're going to take it right back out again and then start introducing small amounts until it sounds kind of like an analog circuit. Too much. And there you have it. That's a PowerSag setting where on this music with this tempo, it's kind of hyping things up a little bit without sounding drastically different. You can switch it off, and you can see that we have lots more energy immediately. And I turn it back on, it's cutting back the energy that we have in this thing because the power supply is just not able to keep up. Well, let's do something a little bit more creative here, which is try to emulate some kind of little transistor circuit. We're going to imagine that we're modeling like an SSL console or something and going, this can sound rowdy and angry when you push it. What do we need to do to emulate the idea of there being lots of power supply circuits all over this giant desk and they don't all get as much electricity as they should? So what we're going to do is increase the depth again, and then we're going to go back and find a higher speed setting that has a real kind of angry rasp to it. It's not going to be hitting the drums as much. It's going to be just weaving itself into everything, especially those low frequency bass notes. And we're just looking for a snarly mess of a really trashed sound. Once we find that, we will explore the lower depth settings and see what we can do as far as making it sound like a real circuit, but one that doesn't sound completely broken from the get-go. First, let's play with the broken. Okay, that sounds pretty rowdy. Maybe that's a little too high. Yeah, I like that place. That sounded kind of like there was this snarly, rowdy quality going on. Now, I could have picked higher if I wanted to accentuate the highs more, but I was voicing it in such a way that it's supposed to sound angry. Now let's set the depth and see if we can dial it into something that sounds useful. Okay, starting to sound raspy. I think this is too raspy. That's definitely too raspy. Listening to that synth sound. That sounds maybe a little too clean. Too crunchy. And now we have a PowerSag PowerSag setting that's kind of emphasizing the rowdiness of the sound. We've got a kind of attitude going on. Maybe we'll back it off a tiny bit more. Holding down Option to get a subtle motion, like it says. And then let's make it be a little faster, just so that it's a little bitier. And let's go back in there and listen to what it would sound like without this. Our snare sounds different already. Listen to the difference in that snare. Then PowerSag. Let's give it a little more juice. Now we're just starting to hear it break up here. PowerSag. Let's boost it a little more. Let's see what it can get. Oh, I can hear it breaking up on those lows. And then without it sounds like this. The kick drum is much bigger. PowerSag was a development that led to a lot of analog emulation type stuff. It's a very simple kind of idea. It's a simple algorithm. But this algorithm models some of the things that happen in circuitry. And as you can hear, you can use it pretty much all on its own without dialing in. The original version of PowerSag had like 2 different speed controls that happened at the same time and stuff, and it was just very difficult to make sense of. I think this one's a lot simpler. And if you don't want to fuss around figuring out exactly what you need to do analog emulations, you can go with some of the ones that I'm going to be releasing pretty soon, like Desk and Transdesk and TubeDesk and stuff like that. But this is where some of that stuff is built on. If you leave out things like slew clipping, if you leave out things like saturation and stuff, this little circuit, this little plugin here is a tiny piece of that. And again, I can demonstrate very easily that if you got it going on and you exaggerate it, there's horribleness to be had. So definitely a raunchy sounding thing. Play wisely with this guy because it makes nasty noises. But then that's part of what we do when we're analog emulating and trying to come up with ways to get these plugins to do interesting things that mimic the very sort of dense, vibey, interesting sounds that were just automatically there in the world of analog gear. In digital, everything is revoltingly too clean and precise, and there are many ways of going about screwing that up, but only one of the ways is just straight distorting everything. This is another one of the options. and I'm going to be putting out the earliest desk variations as free AU and VSTs. But the most recent desk is actually still reserved for when I reach a payment goal. But that's the one where everything's kind of been brought into focus. Anyways, never mind about that. The very first versions of Desk are going to be coming out. And PowerSag is coming out because it's a basic concept upon which a lot of that stuff is built. Something that you can use in things like, oh, I don't know, a drum bus or whatever. You can take a mix using airwindows console and start sticking things like this, or things like Desk, or things like Transdesk on the AUXes inside the console system, just to further condition the sound, cause it to seem like, you're coming from a sidecar mixer or something like that, or that your, drum tracks are so intense that they're just overwhelming the section of the desk that they're on. And so it's going through a PowerSag stage, and that is bringing some rowdiness and grind into things in a way that's not at all the same as just throwing distortion plugins and everything. Because when you throw distortion plugins and everything, stuff gets more forwards and it gets more thick and dense and big. Whereas you throw this, you can't say that this is more forward. It's just insane. It's just nuts. But it's nuts in a very rowdy, angry kind of way. I hope you enjoy PowerSag. I don't think there's been anything quite like it in the realm of VST and audio unit plugs and stuff, just because as usual for Airwindows, it's a weird idea. It's a weird idea that makes ugly noises. But you get to use it subtly, and when you use it subtly, you can do very interesting things that you couldn't have if everything just had to make sense. PowerSag is a free audio unit and Mac and PC VST plugin. If you like it, support my Patreon at like $1 a month, or more if you like, more if it's easy for you to do that. And I'll just keep on coming up with this kind of stuff. There's been a lot of it, there will be a lot more. PowerSag is just a little tiny piece of that very large mosaic of different things that you can do with digital audio. And I hope you enjoy it.